Joining us now via satellite, our first guest is coming to us from lovely Santa Barbara, California, Mr. Derek McLeish. He's the president and CEO of a company called Carbon Sciences Incorporated, stock symbol CABN. Derek, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Don.
Well, now, Derek, Carbon Sciences describes itself as a company which is developing a breakthrough technology to transform carbon dioxide, or CO2, emissions into basic fuel building blocks. Can you give us a general overview of the company, please?
Sure. We're a small company in Santa Barbara. We started April of last year, and in the last year we really focused on CO2 to fuel initially. Spent quite a bit of time analyzing how we could do that and realized that the amount of energy required was very, very high. So we went off and worked for quite a while on our CO2 to carbonates initiative, and that was spectacularly successful for us. And in the background, our chief scientist, Naveed Aslam, said, you know, I still think we can do the CO2 to fuel stuff. So we spent quite a bit of time in the last couple of months, and it's been fantastic for us. We're basically taking a biocatalytic approach, kind of engineering right around the area of organics and chemical processes, and in doing that we've come up with some ways of converting CO2 to fuel very efficiently.
Well, now, Derek, I want to reiterate what we just mentioned because I think this is so important. There's something like 28 billion tons of CO2 emissions each year, and your technology can convert those emissions to fuel?
Yeah, CO2 is one of the most plentiful elements in our atmosphere. You know, oxygen, nitrogen, and CO2 make up the bulk of it. What global warming has been worried about is this change in CO2 from about 350 parts per million to about 550 parts per million, which will change our atmosphere. CO2 at those particulate levels are like this. If I take a breath in, I'm at about 350. When I let it out, it's 550. So you're going to be breathing CO2 at 550 in the future. Just exhaled air from other people. CO2 being that plentiful, we've always viewed it as a waste stream. And as a waste stream, it's fantastic because you can take CO2 and make lots of things with it. Right now, even the paper industry, they're making precipitated calcium carbonate out of CO2. And that's used to whiten paper. And they're doing it right out of the flue. What we're doing in the non-carbonate business, our CO2 to fuel business, is taking CO2 and combining it with water and using our biocatalysts to create the building blocks for energy. C1, C2, C3, methane, ethane, and propane.
Well, let's talk about that for a bit, Derek. You mentioned your technology is based on something called a biocatalytic process, which converts CO2 into basic hydrocarbons. Can you elaborate just a bit more, please?
Sure, I can give you as much as our lawyers will let us on the intellectual property side, but fundamentally, when you look at carbon dioxide, it is a very low-level molecule. It's all set up very low energy. So when people have been talking about breaking hydrogen and oxygen, they usually consider photosynthesis as the number one way of doing it. Then you have photolysis, which is basically adding high energy to break apart hydrogen and oxygen. And finally, you have the whole, separation of hydrogen and oxygen using electricity, which is electrolysis. And those three bases are what has been viewed as such high energy requirements for CO2 to be converted into building blocks. What we've done is we've taken a non-H2, not hydrogen, but the fundamental need of hydrogen, and taken that hydrogen and moved it using our biocatalyst so that it actually destabilizes the carbon dioxide. And with about 5 gallons of water, we can actually make 1 gallon of CO2 type fuel.
Once again, Carbon Sciences Incorporated, CABN's their stock symbol. Our toll-free number for free information in the mail is 888-259-4449. Now, Derek, once CO2 is converted into either methane, ethane, or propane, can they be upgraded to, say, higher fuels like gasoline or even jet fuel?
Actually, that's one of the beauties of our system. There's several of them, but one of them is that our feedstocks, which are basically based on CO2 and water, then become a feedstock into the current petroleum business, and that's the regular refineries. So they can take those feed materials and build them into diesel fuel, they can build them into gasoline, methanol, they can build them into jet fuel. That's the beauty of having the basic hydrocarbons ready to go.
Well, Derek, I have to tell you, this seems like that elusive holy grail of energy, taking environmentally dangerous spent CO2 emissions and turning them into useful fuels once again.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at things that get recycled, it's amazing what gets recycled in this world. You know, the turns that you get out of plastic once they become a polyethylene bottle, and it gets recycled multiple times. But the key thing here is that because of the way we're approaching things, it's the amount of times we can recycle the catalytic process, and the number of times we can get that to turn, that's what really makes the economies. If we turn it one time, we're very uneconomical. If we turn it a million times, we're highly economical.
Well, now, Derek, you mentioned this a few moments ago. I want to touch on it again. You said your process can also convert CO2 into calcium carbonate, which is used extensively by the plastics industry, the pharmaceutical industry, as well as paper manufacturers. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. That's the technology that we developed over the last year and which we're commercializing right now. However, our R&D strategy is basically focusing on CO2 to fuels. Calcium carbonates are even a lower level than CO2. So once you combine, the feedstocks, mineral mines, slimes, tailings, feedstocks from waste concrete, once you combine those things with CO2, you can make them something very high value. And in fact, the paper industry does that right now with precipitated calcium carbonate, and precipitated calcium carbonate can go for as much as $1,000 a ton, and it is used in crazy things like toothpaste. Your wife probably takes it in yogurt because yogurt has precipitated calcium carbonate as a bone builder in it. So it can be everything from gypsum to toothpaste.
Well, now, is your technology proprietary? Can you protect it, or is that even necessary?
Well, absolutely. Number one is we build IP, we build intellectual property. So we have patents pending, we have trade secrets, all of the tools that you'd normally use to protect your intellectual property. And our strategy long term is to license our technology to large companies. If you think about it, I worked for Gillette for 10 years, and one of the key factors was we thought globally. When you think globally, China is the bigger emitter than we are in CO2, and China and India are rapidly rising in this world. So you have to really think globally, and the way to do that is with strategic partners around the world that will license your technology and implement it. And by the way, that's going to be a lot faster than in many cases in the United States, because we have the not in my backyard strategy here, which is no one wants to do something in the backyard. Even burying CO2, which we think is a bad idea, is very difficult to do in the United States, but in foreign countries you can do this much easier. Your time to market's much faster.
Well, Derek, what's the next step for the company to commercialize your technology?
Well, Don, one of the key things we're doing next is a prototype. Our prototype will be available by first quarter of next year. And in our prototype, we haven't given a lot of details, but it's going to be a great way of showing how you can take just a CO2 input, some water, our biocatalyst, and at the end we'll light the fuel.
Stock symbol CABN, company's Carbon Sciences. Our toll-free number for free information, 888-259-4449. Derek, why is this a good time right now for folks to take a closer look at Carbon Sciences?
Lots of things going on. One is, the market's terribly depressed. Everybody is depressed. We're very optimistic. Number two, new government. Lots of things happening in the regulatory and legislative side that are going to change the way, renewables are viewed, the way carbon dioxide is viewed, and so it's going to be, you can get on the ground floor of what's going to be changing in the United States.
Carbon Sciences, CABN. Derek, we're initiating coverage of your company this week. Be watching you very closely through first quarter of '09. Thanks for joining us. Looking forward to more updates from you.
Don, thanks for having me.